Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive straight into the crisis around the Sino-Indian line of actual control, the LAC. We're looking at roughly 2020 to 2024.
Yeah.
And our mission, really, is to unpack these claims you hear about India making, well, strategic concessions, and at the same time, why the global reaction seems so muted.
Right. And I think we have to start with the shock of 2020 itself. I mean, for decades, there were these confidence-building measures, CBMs.
Kept things relatively stable, right? No fatalities between 75 and 2020.
Exactly. Stable, not resolved, but not lethal. Then June 15th, 2020, Galwan Valley. That just changed everything.
The first deaths in decades. 20 Indian soldiers confirmed.
And independent estimates suggesting, maybe 35 to 45 Chinese casualties, too. It was violent confirmation that Beijing's strategy had shifted. Become much more coercive, kinetically so.
A brutal new baseline. So that brings us to the core questions. Why do critics frame what happened next as a kind of betrayal, these strategic concessions you mentioned?
Well, a lot of the controversy kicked off right after Galwan with some political ambiguity. Prime Minister Modi made a public statement.
The one saying, neither has anyone intruded into our border.
That's the one. Critics jumped on that, arguing it, perhaps inadvertently, played into China's narrative. Made it sound like just a dispute over perceptions of the line, not a clear intrusion.
And that ambiguity, they argue, then shaped the actual disengagement deals through these buffer zones.
Precisely. These no-patrol buffer zones became the main tool for de-escalation from 2021 onwards. But the location of those zones is key.
Okay, give us an example.
Pangon So Lake is the classic one. India traditionally patrolled right up to Finger 8. That was their claim line.
Right.
The agreement there involved let's call it a temporary halt, a moratorium on patrolling the area between Figure 4 and Figure 8.
So hang on, that space between 4 and 8, India used to patrol that, considered it accessible?
Yes, historically patrolled and accessed by India. Now, post-agreement, neither side patrols it.
So critics see that as locking in China's gains from 2020.
That's the argument, that India effectively traded getting back to the pre-2020 situation for just tactical peace, stopping the immediate clashes. And it's not just abstract territory. You hear reports from border communities about losing access to huge pasture lands now inside these buffer zones.
But couldn't you argue that stopping the bleeding, reducing the risk of more clashes with a nuclear power was the primary goal? Maybe the critics are being a bit unrealistic.
Look. That's the hard calculation, isn't it? It's why people use that phrase coded concession, risk mitigation versus full restoration of the status quo ante. It was a trade-off.
Okay, so if India made that trade-off, why did the rest of the world basically stay silent? Let's talk about that geopolitical blackout, the U.S., for example.
Yeah, the U.S. response wasn't condemnation. It was more about accelerating strategic alignment.
Like strengthening the Quad.
Exactly. Washington framed the LAC crisis less as a specific border dispute and more as, a key front in the bigger Indo-Pacific security picture. Containment of China became the priority, not necessarily backing India's specific territorial claims point by point. Soft balancing, you could call it.
And Russia, India's traditional arms supplier, they stayed neutral.
Ostensibly neutral, yes. But Russia's caught, really, between its history with India and its growing need to align with China against the West.
So that neutrality doesn't really help India build a united front?
No, quite the opposite. It prevents any kind of unified global pushback against Beijing on this. Keeps it bilateral.
And for Europe, other economies.
Pretty straightforward economic realism, sadly. Stability and trade with China just mattered more than taking a risky stand over a quote-unquote remote border issue. Strategic self-interest won out over norms about territorial integrity.
So summing up that part, the world's silence comes down to stability calculations. Nobody wanted to risk things escalating between two nuclear powers.
That seems to be the bottom line, yes.
And the sources we looked at suggest this isn't about finding a resolution anymore, is it? It's shifted.
Completely. Look at the massive infrastructure built up on both sides. New Chinese camps, India reinforcing positions. It's moved to managing conflict risk, a permanent state of militarized competition. Institutionalized almost.
Which leads to a final, quite provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
If Beijing sees that localized military pressure, like in 2020, ultimately results in diplomatic outcomes, like these buffer zones outcomes that kind of consolidate their tactical gains, what does that do for the future?
Does it incentivize them to try similar salami slicing tactics elsewhere along the border?
That's the worry. That perceived success could actually lower India's strategic deterrence threshold going forward. It's a dangerous dynamic.
Oh,